Hey everybody, Mike Griffith here, and welcome to today's Ingles on the Beat segment. Ready to talk Georgia football with you for the next 30, 45 minutes or so. We take a look at what the Bulldogs did and where the Bulldogs are going. You know, a producer always asked me before the show, hey, what's the headline? Kind of what's the prevailing thought? And all I could think about in the last few days since that Auburn game was, man, has Georgia done a great job surviving this schedule. And that was my thought even before I saw these rankings come up. Recently, there's been some rankings, schedule strength rankings that are kind of getting thrown out there. Everybody has their own. They're not universal, certainly different systems and different computers spit out different rankings. Don't know what the College Football Playoff Committee will be saying, but the rankings that I saw today indicated that Georgia had the number 15 strength of schedule in the country. LSU, number 16th strength of schedule. Penn State, 26. Alabama 34th, if you can believe that. Oregon 44, Oklahoma 45, Utah 49, Ohio State 54, Clemson 68. Point is, Georgia's played the best schedule of the college football playoff contenders, but then you add a twist to it. And I was reminded late last summer when this schedule first came out, and I counted it up the bye weeks. Well, let's take a look at those ranked teams before we go through this here. Georgia with the wins over Florida, Notre Dame, and Auburn. Of course, the College Football Playoff Committee told everyone last week that was the separator for Georgia and why they were ranked ahead of Alabama when Georgia was number 4 and Alabama was number 5. Well, I don't think the Georgia-Alabama discussion will go on much longer, especially now that Tua Tagovailoa appears done for the season. Clemson hasn't played any ranked teams either, but let's face it, they ran roughshod over the ACC with the exception of their close call game at North Carolina. And even though the College Football Playoff Committee says it's only supposed to be about this year, it's not. People remember that Clemson's the defending national champion. Take a look at LSU's wins there. Florida, Auburn, Alabama. Impressive for sure. That Texas win, though, losing some luster as Texas starts to fade. Remember when we thought Texas would be a top 10 team. Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Cincinnati. I've got my questions about Wisconsin. As I've said, their quarterback, I've seen JV quarterbacks with stronger arms, not much of a threat to throw. And Cincinnati, respectable enough, but it is what it is, an American Athletic Conference opponent. So I have my questions about the Buckeyes. They'll soon be answered. Ohio State plays Penn State at home and finishes the season at Michigan. But when you consider Georgia's strength of schedule, it's one thing. But then when you also consider that 5 of the last 6 opponents that Georgia has played had a bye week before playing Georgia. Now, Georgia had a bye week before 2 of those games as well. Both Tennessee and Georgia had a bye before they met October 5th in Neyland Stadium. And both Georgia and Florida had a bye before they met, November 2nd in Jacksonville. So you could say that negated it somewhat. But still, you're playing rested teams that have had an extra week to prepare for what you do. And let's face it, when you wear that top 5 ranking or that top 10 ranking, that's a big win for these teams. That's an opportunity for them to show out. It's not just another game. And for Georgia, you're taking everyone's best punch. And in 5 of the last 6 weeks, rested teams' best punch. That makes a difference. I don't know whether or not the College Football Playoff Committee will take that into consideration, but they should. That should elevate Georgia's schedule. I've heard some people even suggest that maybe Georgia should move up in the rankings from number 4, maybe ahead of Clemson. That would be the argument to do it. The difficulty of schedule, and it's just how much you factor that in. Now, you could say, well, Georgia hasn't been overly impressed. Maybe not on the scoreboard. But I say this is where you be careful what you wish for. Let's just talk about the Tua injury first and foremost. I mean, everyone's got an opinion on it. I certainly have mine. To preface my opinion on this, I want to make it clear that I voted for Tua Tagovailoa to win the Heisman Trophy last year. I thought he was the most outstanding player throughout the regular season on an Alabama team that won at a historic clip. They won every game by, 22, 23 points or more, until they ran into that Georgia defense in the SEC championship game. And Tua was the reason why. His dazzling play, his ability to extend plays, the way he would run the ball fearlessly. And I thought and said at the time, too fearless, that if you run the ball that much, if you extend plays to that extent, sooner or later, you will get hit. Sooner or later, you will go down. The same thing happened with Tim Tebow at Florida. Kentucky put him out. And Tua is a warrior for playing the way that he plays. And an exciting player. Again, I thought the most outstanding player in college football last season. And this season, I thought he was having another markedly good season. You watched how he threw the ball. He's got a great cannon. So who was at fault for the injury? I mean, that's where everybody wants to place blame. I don't place the blame on Nick Saban. Nick Saban's job is to try to win national championships. That's why he's getting paid what he's getting paid. That's why Alabama spends the money that they spend. It's why everything circulates around football, academic schedule, classes, things of this nature. It's all built around Alabama winning national championships, and that's Nick Saban's charge. So his job is to go out there and do whatever he needs to do. Once Alabama lost to LSU, it turned into a beauty contest for them. The only way they were going to get in was with a quote-unquote at-large bid. They were not going to play in the SEC championship game unless you expect LSU to lose to Arkansas or Texas A&M at home. I do not. And thus, Alabama had to look good winning. So with the score 35-7 or 38-7 or whatever it was, and less than 2 minutes left in the first half, Tua is out there playing because Nick Saban recognizes to impress the College Football Playoff Committee, he needs to beat Mississippi State by 50 or 60 points. So we say, oh, wow, look how great Alabama is while Georgia is slugging it out and winning by a touchdown at Auburn, because some people buy into those numbers. And when I say some people, I mean the College Football Playoff Committee. And all you need to do is turn back the clock to last year when Oklahoma was chosen over Georgia. Because Oklahoma's offense was so impressive. They scored so many points. Nobody paid attention to the fact that they allowed over 30 points a game, but their defense didn't even rank in the top 100. What they did see was the points that Oklahoma was putting on the scoreboard. And that's why Oklahoma got in, because the committee was so dazzled by their offense that they couldn't reach a decision, Oklahoma or Georgia. Imagine that. The Florida athletic director, the Georgia Tech athletic director, and the Oklahoma athletic director couldn't come to a decision on who the fourth best team was, so they reverted back to protocol, which meant Oklahoma wins the tie because they won their conference championship game. So offense matters. And Nick Saban saw that, and Nick Saban knows that, and so he was going to play Tua as long as he needed to play Tua to put up as many points as he could. The argument that they needed to practice the 2-minute offense is ridiculous. The fact of the matter is Alabama was running up the score because that's what it takes to make the college football playoff these days. This is where we are at with the college football playoff. It was just a few weeks ago that Ohio State was playing Maryland and executed an onside kick in the second quarter. This is what college football has become under these circumstances, because we don't have a clear set of parameters of what qualifies a team for the college football playoff. All we know is that a committee of 13 people with sitting athletic directors are going to make a decision based on a number of metrics: schedule strength, offensive ranking, defensive rankings, game control, the health of players is a factor now. So Kirby Smart, he had a decision to make last year. There were plenty of games last year early in the season when Kirby could have kept Jake Fromm in the game, and instead he played Justin Fields, and Fields handed off the ball. I'm sure you probably saw the video clip. Justin Fields wasn't always happy with that role or satisfied with his playing time. He has since taken his ball and gone elsewhere, and is having an outstanding season at Ohio State, where I expect him to be a Heisman Trophy finalist for a Buckeyes team that I expect to win the last 2 games of the regular season, along with the Big Ten title, and reach the college football playoff. But back to the point is, Kirby Smart chose not to run up the score, and he's chosen to protect his quarterback. Now, there's been plenty of opportunities where Jake Fromm could have kept the ball on an RPO or run it just flat out on a quarterback draw, or plenty of opportunities where Kirby could have elected for there to be more pass plays with a big lead. But instead, Georgia has run the football, and they've done it to run out the clock, and they've done it to protect their quarterback. That's a decision. When you hear conservative, Kirby's conservative, so many people, they immediately take a negative connotation to conservative. Sometimes conservative is smart. And in fact, more times than not, it's smart. Because one thing that Kirby Smart recognized early in this year, and you can go back and look at the transcripts, he said early in the year, more quarterbacks were getting hurt because more offenses were running the quarterback. Georgia has made a calculated decision not to go in that direction with Jake Fromm. Now, they haven't lit up the scoreboard like some of these teams, and a lot of fans have said, oh, they should be. But what they have done is protect their quarterback from getting hit. That was a calculated decision by Kirby Smart. Now, I'm not saying that Alabama's doing it the wrong way or that LSU's doing it the wrong way, but what I am saying is give credit where credit is due. And you better believe that future quarterback recruits are going to take that into consideration when they choose a school. If you go to school A, you'll probably run it 7 to 10 times a game. If you go to Georgia, you probably aren't going to run it very much. And you're going to have this offensive line to protect you. This all goes into consideration for quarterback recruits. Now, how well has Georgia prepared Jake Fromm for the NFL? I think we're going to need to wait another year to find out. I don't have any inside information on this. No one's told me that Jake Fromm is staying for another year. But what I do know is that Jake Fromm is a pretty smart guy. And as talented as Jake is, he probably knows that the NFL Combine is not going to be kind to him. He's not going to run a good 40 time. And when I say by good, I mean sub 4.6 or sub 4.7. He's not going to have the strongest arm in the workout. He's not going to have the highest vertical jump. What he is a very good quarterback who knows how to manage a game. And Jimbo Fisher said a lot about that this week. Jimbo said, a lot of people want to know, how's his arm strength or how fast does he run? He knows how to win games. Unfortunately for Jake, Georgia has not had the best situation to throw the ball this year. They lost their top 5 pass catchers. You take away the top 5 pass catchers for any quarterback and ask him to break in a brand new crew. Remember, Tyler Simmons had 9 catches. He was the leading returning receiver. They're going to have some struggles, especially against the competition that Georgia's played, especially when 5 out of the last 6 have had an extra week to prepare and a bye week, especially when you play the number 15 schedule in the country. So the fact that Georgia is sitting here at 9-1 for a third consecutive year, think about it. I'm going to say that again. Georgia, through 10 games, is 9-1 for a third consecutive year. How many other programs can say that? How many other programs can say that they have been in the college football playoff race 10 weeks through the season the last 3 years running? I think Clemson and Georgia, and I'm not even sure about Ohio State. Kirby Smart has done his part to build an outstanding championship-level program. Now, Georgia's got to finish the deal. 2017, it's too painful for some of you to relive. But we all know what happened. Georgia was the best team in college football, and they didn't execute in overtime. Simple as that. Last season, I thought you had a good case, an argument for Georgia to be in the college football playoff. Not sure anybody would have beat that Clemson team as healthy and strong as they were at the end of the year. But I do believe that Georgia would have given Alabama a better game than Oklahoma did, considering that Oklahoma trailed 28-0 after 17 minutes against Alabama last year. I do think Georgia would have given them a better game. I think it would have been a different Georgia. We know that DeAndre Baker would have played. We know that he didn't play against Texas because it wasn't a playoff game. And we know that that was a big factor in that game against Texas because it sent a message. And that message is still alive and well at Georgia. This is the danger of the high expectations that Kirby's built. Let's be honest. If Georgia is not in the college football playoff, their bowl trip probably won't end with a win because there will probably be another handful of guys sitting out and not playing that have high draft potential. I would count on that. This DeAndre Baker set the tone. Now, how does Kirby Smart react this time? I don't know. Does he bring those guys on the trip this time around? If that's the scenario, that would have to play out. But right now, I think Georgia stands a 50-50 chance of making the college football playoff as things stand. Even with all the injuries, even with LSU standing between them and the college football playoff, and Texas A&M standing between them and the college football playoff. See, I give A&M a puncher's chance because of Jimbo Fisher and because of the momentum that the Aggies have built with 4 straight wins. Now, you might say, well, look back, and they lost to Auburn, and they lost to Alabama, and they lost to – that was then. This is now. Just as this is a different Georgia team than we saw against Notre Dame and Vanderbilt in September, I think this is a different Texas A&M team. And I think this Saturday's game in Athens is going to be a slugfest, and I think it's going to be a tough game for Georgia to win. The Georgia Tech game is a walkover. That's an easy game. Some guys will play some and then get a lot of rest. It's conveniently scheduled this particular season, and then they'll face LSU in the SEC championship game. And if Georgia takes care of business against A&M and Georgia Tech, as I suspect they will, and no one else gets hurt, they got a good chance against LSU because they've got the secondary to match up with LSU. Tyson Campbell coming back, that's a story that's really flown under the radar. Not enough people are talking about this. I think Tyson Campbell is dynamic. Another guy that's come on the scene that's making some plays, number 7, Tyreke Stephenson. This guy's talented. Remember Dan Lanning told us about him the start of fall when he had that comment and said, holy moly, we've got ourselves a ball player. That was the reaction. Well, now that Stephenson is putting the time in the film room, now that Stephenson is taking the time to learn the scheme, the talents are coming out. Kirby talked about that after the game. You know, these guys, they all grow at different rates. It's hard to know when they're going to blossom or how they're going to blossom. But we are seeing Tyreke Stephenson right now factor in, and he will be on the field against LSU. And I do think he's a difference maker. So the Georgia defense, in my book, is getting stronger. The offense, not necessarily the case. Now, the guy that needs to step up there is Jamari Salyer. You might remember Jeff Sentell talked a lot about him. He was a guy that Jeff talked about, oh, he was this and he was that. And it's year 3 now for Jamari. And he got plugged in with Cade Mays and Ben Cleveland, both injured against Auburn. It's time for Jamari to produce in the clutch. And I think we'll see that for Jamari Salyer. I think that Jamari can do a pretty good job. Year 2 for Jamari. I think he can do a pretty good job. He got some experience last year. He got some first-team reps in spring drills. Haven't seen much from him. I think he got a little nicked up at the start of the year, but he's a guy that could be ready to come to fruition. That championship depth on the offensive line needs to make a difference with Cade Mays and Ben Cleveland banged up. This is what Sam Pittman is getting paid the big bucks for, and we've seen in the past Georgia's depth on the offensive line come through. It really needs to come through right now. That's going to be a big factor against A&M, and it's going to be a big factor against LSU. So you need to keep that offensive line healthy, and you need to make sure that championship depth is ready to kick in. And then you got the receiving corps. Lawrence Cager, he came out early against Auburn. Remember, after the Florida game he played well in, but he'd had 2 weeks of rest before that game. He was trying to go on 1 week, wasn't able to do it. Not sure what Cager's status is going to be. And Kirby said that. He would be at practice, but it was a matter of how he could sustain it. How many hits can Cager take before that sprained shoulder, that separated shoulder flares up? That's going to be a question with Lawrence for the rest of the year. It will be a luxury if Lawrence Cager can play another 4-quarter game this season. And you got to ask yourself, how much do you want to put him out there against Texas A&M? Do you rest him against A&M and Georgia Tech with hopes that he will be that much better for LSU? And that question will be determined, I believe, by how well some other receivers perform. Really good to see Dominic Blaylock step up with that 51-yard catch. He was the second option. I believe George Pickens was the first on that out route on the outside. And Jake check and go over the top and Blaylock be open like that. It kind of makes me wonder, why don't we see that more often? Why isn't Blaylock the primary more often? He seems like a playmaker to me. He seems like a guy that gets open. He's a guy that Jake Fromm has said from the start that will execute and be where he's supposed to be. So I look for Dominic Blaylock to continue to evolve. George Pickens was quiet in that game, only 1 catch. It was an 11-yard catch for a first down, which was an achievement on a night that only saw 3 first downs. But you need to see George Pickens continue to evolve. Matt Landers, waiting for him to make another catch. Kyrus Jackson had his first catch since coming back from that injury, that broken hand that he suffered in the opener. He's a guy that Kirby said continues to get better every week. But the receiving core to me is the X factor for Georgia. So Jake Fromm can only do so much. A lot of people have been down on Jake, but it's really not Jake, okay? Jake is the same guy that he's been the first 2 years. The receivers aren't as good. There, I said it. It's a fact. The receiving core is not as good. I looked in the stats the other day, and Tennessee quarterback Jarrett Garantano had a better quarterback rating than Jake Fromm. And the first inclination from some people might be, well, that's Jim Chaney. That's Jim Chaney over James Coley. No, it's not. And I'm not going to say that Jim Chaney's not a great offensive coordinator, because I think he is. And I'm not going to tell you that I've settled the Coley-Chaney debate in my mind, because it's to be determined in my book. I want to see what Coley has left. He had a couple of nice plays against Auburn that really made a difference in the red zone. Kudos to Coley for that. Can he continue to come up with the new plays like Jim Chaney did? We will wait and see. No, the reason that Jarrett Garantano has a higher quarterback rating than Jake Fromm is because Jarrett Garantano is throwing to Marquez Callaway and Juwan Jennings, who are markedly better than any of the Georgia receivers right now. Ultimately, George Pickens is the most talented of all those names, but he's not there yet. Lawrence Cager, when he's 100%, is as good as any of those names, but he's not 100%. Dominic Blaylock, by the end of next season, will be as good as any of those names, but he's still a freshman. And not to mention a freshman who did not early enroll, and neither did Pickens. So these guys have had a very sharp learning curve. So when it comes down to quarterback ratings and quarterback performance, a lot of it has to do with who you're throwing to. Keep that in mind, because I've seen a lot of people go after Jake Fromm, and they don't realize there's nobody open. There's not enough separation. And when Jake Fromm does not throw interceptions, Georgia wins football games. We saw what happened against South Carolina when Jake tried to force the issue. One ball went off a receiver's hands and was intercepted. On another occasion, the receiver turned in, and Jake threw out, trying to throw the ball away. That was 2 of the 3 picks. On another one, the receiver did not come back for the ball. You can debate whether or not that's on the receiver or Jake, but you could make the case that all 3 of those picks, that none of them were Jake's fault. Sometimes it has to do with the receiving core, and that is the case this year. Georgia has failed to develop receivers fast enough, and they put themselves in a bad position with the 2 underclassmen going pro early, McCole Hardman and Ridley. And then when Jeremiah Holloman got himself kicked off the team, that was strike 3. And so that's why Georgia is where they are. And where they are is still on the verge of the college football playoffs. And that's why I make the case that Kirby Smart has done an outstanding job and should be considered for SEC Coach of the Year if Georgia makes the SEC championship game and wins the SEC championship game. And if he makes the college football playoff, then put his name in the Coach of the Year running. Because Kirby Smart's had to recruit these players. He should get credit for that. Don't say, well, he should when he has all that talent. He had to go out there and get those guys, right? Because Kirby Smart had to coach against 5 teams in 6 weeks that were coming off of bye weeks. That's awful tough to beat a team that's had an extra week to prepare. But Kirby's done it. Because Kirby Smart has had to win despite a complete makeover of a receiving core, losing his top 5 wideouts. I challenge you to find another team in the country that lost their top 5 wideouts. I don't think you can find one. Because Kirby Smart and his offense have had to deal with only 1 lineman starting every game at his position. They've had to juggle the offensive line how many times? The original offensive line, I think, has started 3 or 4 games together out of 10. There's been that much attrition on the offensive line and in the receiving core. Kirby Smart had to deal with his best cornerback being out, 5-6 games with Tyson Campbell? Is that how many he missed? So I look at what Kirby Smart's done. I look at what he's had to navigate, and I look at where the team is. And I think he's done a good job. And I think that he should get some credit for that. I don't hear many people giving Kirby credit for the job that he has done coaching this year. Oh, and by the way, he had to replace both coordinators, and he promoted from within to do it. This is the Georgia system. What you're seeing is all Kirby Smart. There's no guru coming in from the outside, where Orgeron hires somebody from the Saints and he runs an NFL offense, and they make Dave Aranda the highest paid defensive coordinator, and he runs this team. This is Kirby Smart. What you're seeing is Kirby, okay? You're not seeing guys making over $1 million as an offensive and defensive coordinator. In fact, the Georgia coaching staff took a pay cut since last season. Find me another team in the college football playoffs with a coaching staff making less money than a year ago. but that's what's happening in Georgia with Kirby Smart. I go to your comments now. Always fun to talk to you. We start right out with a doubter, Kevius Bass. Jake is just not that guy. Stop making excuses for him. Kevius, I don't know if you watched the 2017 National Championship game, but Georgia was on the verge of winning that game with Alabama facing a 2nd and 26. And if the Georgia defense forces Alabama out, then Jake Fromm wins the national championship as a true freshman. I don't know what guy you're looking for, but I know that he was the freshman All-American quarterback that year, and I know that he's about 33-6 as Georgia's quarterback and 32-6 as a starter. And I don't know many other quarterbacks that I could say that about. So I'm not sure what guy you're looking for, but I see a guy that wins football games and leads, and that's what Kirby Smart wants in this particular offense. Now, he may not be that guy for the spread. He may not be that guy to light up the scoreboard or run around and post ridiculous numbers, but he's also a guy who doesn't turn the ball over. In fact, you'd have to go back to the South Carolina game to find the last turnover that Jake Fromm had. I'm not even sure he had any interceptions outside of that South Carolina game. I don't have the stats in front of me, but this is a guy that's done a very good job managing games and winning football games at Georgia. So you're certainly entitled to your opinion. He's not your guy, but I think Kirby feels very comfortable that he's Georgia's guy. Let's see, James Crump, talent-wise, this receiving core. Boy, these comments go so fast, they fell right off my screen. I wasn't able to get to that. Look, here's the thing about this receiving core. I'm not a hater here. I respect these guys. I wrote a story last week about Tyler Simmons, and Tyler had a big drop against South Carolina. The ball went off his hands, probably cost Georgia the game. Hit that in the Rodrigo Blankenship field goal miss. But listen, as I told one of my coworkers earlier, and I won't mention any names, these guys aren't always perfect. They all make mistakes. They all drop passes. They all miss blocks. They all miss tackles. And we are now in a culture where it seems like that's all we want to talk about, what these guys don't do. So I come on here today and I say Kirby Smart should be coach of the year. I knew there would be somebody that would say, yeah, but he lost to South Carolina. Yep, you're right. He sure did. I want you to name the coach in the last 8 years in the SEC that's gone through the entire season undefeated and won a national championship. And if I were to wait, I would never leave the studio because nobody has done it since Auburn in 2010. This league is different. This is not the ACC, folks. This is not the Big Ten. There's no powder puff games where you can rest this guy or rest that guy or rest these 3 or 5 guys and get away with it. Because every game, there's somebody on the other side of the ball that is capable of beating you. And in Georgia's case, with 5 of the last 6 teams having a bye week, they're especially rested and especially prepared to take you down so they can have their Sports Center top 10 moment. Okay? You got a target on you. Now, that makes me respect Alabama all that much more because Nick Saban and Alabama have been able to sustain even with that target on their back until this year, until Alabama became a victim of themselves, trying to run a 2-minute drill up by 4 touchdowns because they needed to impress the College Football Playoff Committee. Again, I'm not blaming Alabama or Nick Saban for that because that's the game. That's the old don't hate the player, hate the game. All right? That's hate the College Football Playoff because you got to impress those people. And you never know what's going to impress them. Like I said, Oklahoma got in because they scored a bunch of points. They didn't play a lick of defense all year. Didn't matter. That's what impressed them. That's what turned them on. That's what the Georgia Tech and Florida AD, and they were part of the committee that voted Oklahoma in. They were excited by that. So don't blame Nick Saban for trying to impress the committee. All right? Kirby's doing it his way. Kirby knows he's not going to get the benefit of the doubt. He figured that out last year. If Georgia loses another game, they're not getting in. If they lose to A&M but beat LSU, they're not getting in. Okay? They are not going to get the benefit of the doubt from that 13-member committee. Not going to happen with 2 losses. Be clear on that. Now, a 2-loss team might make it if chaos reigns. But as I look at Oregon and Utah, who will likely meet in the Pac-12 championship game. They're the teams looking out right now. If we just play this, let's just play this list right now. So let's say LSU 1, Clemson, Ohio State 2 and 3, whatever order, and right now Georgia 4. Right now you're looking at probably Oregon and Utah with 1 loss sitting on the outside looking in. They've moved ahead of Alabama now that Tua is injured. I don't think there's any question about that. So the question becomes, what happens if Georgia goes -2, if they lose to A&M and beat LSU, and Oregon and Utah play this string out and meet each other with one loss? One of those teams will finish with one loss, and I contend that one of those teams will finish ahead of a 2-loss Georgia. Here's who Oregon has left on the schedule. They're at Arizona State this Saturday. Arizona State just lost to Oregon State last week by a point and has lost 4 games in a row. And then they finished the season against Oregon State in their, what do they call that? The Uncivil War, the Civil War, whatever they call that up there. Oregon State. And then you look at Utah. They are at Arizona, and they are home against a 4-win Colorado team. So I think it's safe to say that you will have a Pac-12 team in contention. And that is why I rule out the chance of Georgia losing to Texas A&M and making the college football playoff, even if they were to beat LSU. Now, I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that. And in 2 or 3 weeks, the perspective that may change. And let me say something about that. This social media game that we play in the media now, it's pinned the tail on the reporter. And I have been the donkey selected my fair share of times when people like to pull up tweets. And last week, Auburn pulled up a tweet something I said on the Paul Feinbaum show after Auburn lost the final game after Auburn lost and suffered their second loss and they were eliminated from SEC West contention. And I said Auburn's dead man walking, because they were pretty much eliminated from making it to the SEC championship. I said that 2 weeks ago. Since that time, Auburn beat Ole Miss and had a bye week. And somebody wanted to bring up that quote from 2 weeks ago. It's almost like if I were to pull up a weatherman's report from September and go, look at this. He said there'd be a high of 80, and it's only 50 out. Things change. Opinions change. Facts and circumstance change. It's very fluid. You've probably noticed Feinbaum like, oh, Mike, you're the guy that told us in the offseason that Georgia. Yes, I did. Before J.J. Holloman got kicked off the team. Before Lawrence Cager sprained his shoulder. Before Kieras Jackson broke his hand in the opener. Before 4 out of 5 Georgia offensive linemen were injured. Yes, I said all that. Before we knew that the LSU offense would look like the New Orleans Saints. Yes, I said that in November and last November, February, and March. What do I say right now, though? Well, nobody wants to know that. I'd rather pull up what you said 2 weeks ago. And yet still, I'm going to be foolish enough to continue to give predictions, knowing fully well that there's going to be some people that are miserable enough in life to try and take you down on Twitter and social media. Not going to stop me from giving my opinions and my thoughts, okay? Hindsight is 20/20. It's no different than questioning a coach. Why did you run instead of pass? Why did you pass instead of run? You do what you do because you think it's what's best at that moment. You say what you say because the facts as they are presented to you and the evidence and the perspective that you have at the moment leads you to this conclusion. Different people have different perspectives. They talk to different players, coaches, have seen different things and circumstances to draw from. So if my opinion is a little bit different and you disagree, that's okay. You may know something that I don't know. I had a reader correct me on Lawrence Cager's injury 2 weeks ago. I thought it was a subluxation and it was popping out a joint. It turned out it was a sprained AC joint, which is not a subluxation. I was wrong. That person knew something that I didn't. I'm good with that. Bring knowledge to the table. But when you start talking about taking people down for opinions and you dig into their Twitter timeline, man, you got a problem in life. That's just wrong, I think. So my little spiel and vent on how social media gets abused, just be careful when you see the retweet. You know, Mike Griffith said this. I never said that. People, he said, no, I didn't say it. And people and enough people start retweeting. People, why'd you say that? I didn't say that. I never said it was okay that Georgia lost to South Carolina. I never said it was okay. Paul Feinbaum said, who are the 5 teams that had byes? I said, blah, 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 blah in South Carolina. And he said, mockingly, well, then that's okay. Because, no, I didn't say it, though. So, just want to get that off my chest. Lee Bridges says, Dan Lanning has a pay raise coming. That or a head coaching offer. Keep your eye on Dan Lanning. This is a guy who is headed for a head coaching job in the next 2 or 3 years tops. tops. He'll be gone. He'll be leading a program. If the Memphis coach goes somewhere, Norvell, they're hiring Dan Lanning. Because that's where he came from, and he's a winner. And Kirby knows it. Kirby loves Dan Lanning. Why? Because Dan Lanning can make Kirby think. If you impress Kirby Smart as a football coach, let me tell you, you've done something. Kirby's a guru, folks. I don't know how he comes across behind the microphone. I don't know what you think of him when he gives us our answers at the press conference. But let me tell you, this guy is thinking at a different speed than we are. Instead of asking yourself, how in the world did Georgia get outgained 158-2 in the fourth quarter? Ask yourself, how did Kirby Smart hold Gus Malzahn to 2 touchdowns when Gus had an extra week of preparation? Ask yourself that. Gus Malzahn was 9-0 coming off a bye week at Auburn, 11-0 in his career. Gus Malzahn is a guru. Now, I did say he's got the charisma of an Undertaker. He doesn't have much personality, and he may not be the guy that you want on the billboard representing your program. But when it comes to brains, let me tell you, Gus Malzahn knows football. And he does things on offense that nobody else does. And they're very tough to prepare for. And that goes right over some people's heads. Fans say, it's his foot. No, listen. Gus is tough to prep for. Talk to the Georgia players. Talk to Kirby Smart. Guy's a good coach. He may be on the verge of being fired. Because Auburn, what has it been? 4 or 5 years? Time for a new coach. This is the climate that we're in now. These coaching changes are amazing. Nobody wants to stick with the guy. If you don't get it done in 2 or 3 years, you're gone. It's shocking. And I think about it for Georgia. I fear for the Georgia fans. I really do. Because Kirby has set the bar so high. The guy said going into this year that 24-5 wasn't good enough. Kirby, give yourself a break. 24-5 is good enough to keep your job and to feel good about it. I understand Kirby wants national championships, but don't kid yourself into thinking that if your team wins 12 games a year, that's not good enough. Stop it. Stop. Don't think that. If your team wins 10 wins a game at Georgia, 10 wins a season at Georgia is good enough. Appearing in the SEC championship game every other year over 10 years is good enough. Now, right now, you might say seize the moment. You got Jake Fromm, a third-year starter. You might say that this year it's not good enough. But over the course of time, don't fall into that trap. I saw it happen firsthand at Tennessee. I watched Tennessee go to the 2007 SEC championship game. And the next year, after a slow start, their leading rusher, Arian Foster, injured. They blow a game at UCLA. They get pounded by Alabama. And the coach, the first ballot Hall of Fame coach, gets fired before the end of the season, less than 1 year removed from playing in the SEC championship game. Unbelievable. And you know what they said back then? Anybody could coach Tennessee. Anybody can win there. It's such a great place. It's such a great stadium. It's a national program. Anybody can win at Tennessee. Get Fulmer out of here. Tennessee has not been back to the SEC championship game. Now, Georgia's entering this dangerous area. Anybody can coach at Georgia. All the talent in state. You got $170 million in facilities going up. Beautiful Sanford Stadium. Put anybody. No, they can't because they haven't. Okay? They haven't. Georgia has not won a national title since 1980. There's been some damn good coaches since then that couldn't finish it. All right? Kirby's close. Give him time. Don't even let the thought enter your mind. Don't start talking about choking. Don't start talking about, he can't beat up. Listen, Kirby's not playing safety. He's not the guy that got looked off. All right? Kirby's not a doctor. He can't do emergency surgery on Lawrence Cager right now and repair that shoulder. There's circumstances. And Georgia has tough circumstances. Their crossover game is Auburn. That's a tough one. That's a tough rivalry. You see how Auburn plays. It's physical. And we just got done talking about a good coach that can scheme you up. This year, he got dealt a schedule with 5 out of 6 weeks playing a team coming off a bye. It's going to take a toll. Even if you survive it, you're going to be a little bit more bruised up than the next guy. Your schedule strength ranks 15th in the country. That's highest of all these playoff teams. You've played better teams. They've taken you deeper into the fourth quarter. Consequently, you have not been able to play as much as many people as maybe you'd like to, or rest guys as much as you want to. Georgia has had a tough climb to the top of their mountain. Clemson's climb to the top of their mountain has not been as difficult. Okay? They don't have the scripts, the scrapes, the nicks, the bruises. They haven't had the games that Georgia has had. They had A&M in September before A&M had grown into what A&M is right now. All right? So there's a difference. So before you judge Kirby, before you judge Georgia, take the circumstance into consideration. This has been a tough year for Kirby and Georgia. They have had to overcome a lot of adversity, a lot of injuries, just to get to this point. If Georgia beats A&M and goes to the SEC championship game under the circumstances, I'm saying that's enough. In my opinion, I think he's done a great job. If they beat LSU, icing on the cake. But to me, everything after getting to the SEC championship game with one loss is icing on the cake because of the receiver situation, because of the injuries, and because of the way the schedule played out. Now, some of you might disagree. But I think, to me, that would be, you know what, Georgia had a good season. Not a great season. Not where they should. They got to win a title. I know a title has to come, but this is the coach that's going to deliver it. But don't get impatient. And don't start throwing players under the bus. You know, the people ripping Jake Fromm. And Matt, nobody's calling for Kirby to be fired, but I'm hearing the talk already that, well, if Kirby doesn't, if they don't win this year, this will be the third time. Kirby is in rarefied air right now with Steve Spurrier. The only two coaches to win the SEC East 3 straight years. That's amazing. And again, they've done it with Auburn as their crossover opponent. Okay, that's tough. That's a very losable game. You wonder how Missouri won those 2 times? Go back and look at their schedule. All right, they were playing Auburn as their crossover opponent. Teams have kind of taken the back door. South Carolina, the year they won it, okay? But if you're Georgia, you win it 3 years in a row, that's a heck of a job. This team has done a heck of a job. And now Mark Silver, I've lost my mind. The play calling sucks. Mark, I would love to hear what plays you call when receivers can't get open. I would love to know what offense you've coordinated. You're wrong, sir. No offense, but if receivers can't get open, there's no play in the playbook that's going to work. Well, you can do some things. You can have a twist, and Coley did that in the red zone. Both of those plays, the touchdown pass to Eli Wolf was very well designed. The touchdown to Brian Herrien out of that power set formation in the shift, that was something new that was drawn up. Those were manufactured points by your offensive coordinator. But ultimately, it comes down to having guys that can get open and catch the football, and that's where Georgia's had some trouble, and it is what it is. You're listening and watching the Ingles on the Beat segment. I'm looking at comments now, watching some comments get, let's see, Joyce Dugan on any given Saturday. Joyce, you probably know more about football than some of these other folks, and you may not have played it. But you're right. That's the other element, the any given Saturday argument. And how many times have we seen it play out? And coaches say that you don't have to be the best team all season. You just have to be the best team on that Saturday. And Georgia has lived to fight another day. I don't know if Georgia is a better football team than Auburn right now because of how injured they are. Certainly, they didn't look like the better team in the fourth quarter. They got outgained 158-2. But they won the game. They found a way to win the game. They willed themselves to that win. The defense rose up and made stops against an offense that had found their rhythm in their home stadium. That was a championship moment for Georgia. I just hope, and I thought this the whole drive home, I hope that what Georgia has done this year with the wins over Notre Dame and the win over Auburn, the win at Tennessee after Tennessee has started that game so strong, and you see Tennessee playing good right now, I hope that doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Because I felt like last year's team, a lot of great things that last year's team did got lost in the shuffle. And let me tell you, that last year's team grew and got better every week. But there were some great wins last year. Try to enjoy each week for what it is. I understand that the media, including myself, we're now all pushing this college football narrative. And there's the college football playoff teams, and then there's just everybody else. And that's dangerous to college football to me. And it's unfortunate. I talked earlier about how I thought that affected Alabama's judgment and going in a 2-minute drill or playing a quarterback that maybe wasn't at 100% because the need was to win the game. I know Saban said he used an example of Aaron Rodgers. Well, Aaron Rodgers is an NFL player who's getting paid. Okay, that's the difference there. So maybe now this name likeness thing kicks in a little bit more when you recognize that a guy like Tua may not play again. He might. I don't know. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I know there's also a chance that he might not, and that would be very sad, and that would be a shame because that guy is a warrior. Whatever you think of him as a fan, you're Georgia, he's Alabama. I can tell you as a person, having run across this guy, he is magical. Okay, he is a wonderful young man, and what happened was terrible. And anybody that's run across him sincerely feels for him, and it is part of the game nowadays. And it's one more reason, and I had a chance to talk to one of Jake's family members, that they appreciate Georgia's offensive line protecting the quarterback and the play calling that protects the quarterback. There's more to the game than what you see. Kirby Smart is playing chess, not checkers. Kirby Smart told us in September, more quarterbacks will get hurt because of the trend for quarterbacks to run. He was right. Kirby usually is. He is ahead in the game. And that's why I think this year, if he were to beat LSU and A&M, I think he should win SEC Coach of the Year. A lot of opinions today. I know not all of you agreed with me. Again, I went over my little perspective spiel. You may have a different perspective. You may have knowledge that I don't have, but on some things I feel very firm about. And one of them is the job that Kirby Smart's done. Another one is that Kirby Smart is the best coach to lead this program, regardless of how this season turns out. I don't think you can call it a disappointment. I think Georgia has overcome enough adversity that if they beat A&M and Georgia Tech, you should be darn happy with this season. Because they've had a lot dealt their way. And if you would have told me before the year they were going to have all these injuries in the receiving core and that J.J. Holloman wouldn't be around and got kicked off the team and that 5 of 6 teams would have bye, I would have told there's no way they're going to be – there's no way they have a chance. But here they are. Here they are. Here they are. Here we are. Hope you've enjoyed today's Ingles on the Beat segment. I'm going to get back to Athens. There I will be for the Kirby Smart press conference this evening to see what Kirby has to say about the injury status of Cade Mays and Ben Cleveland. Cade not practicing yesterday. Ben missing 2 practices last week. Both not finishing the game. Lawrence Cager. Are there any other injuries? We'll ask Kirby about that. And we'll talk to him about Texas A&M running some pro set. To me, it's just 2 more guys in the backfield. You can line them up however you want. But A&M's doing it a little bit differently, and I think they've found a winning edge, and you'll see a story on that coming up on Dog Nation as well. Thanks for watching. Follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32. Feel free to email me, MikeGriffith032@gmail.com, or leave your comments, and I'll go back through here and respond to them. Everybody have a great Tuesday. We'll be back next week.